Welcome, y'all. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Taylor, and my husband's name is Will. We traveled to Mykonos back in June with Will's family, and we made our way to Delos while visiting Greece. Be sure to check out my Mykonos video if you haven't on the channel later. And for now, walk with us, where at once gods and ancients alike traversed. A place that holds you in its history and transports you back in time. In Delos, to touch is to feel, and if you can trust your intuition, then to feel is to know. Follow along and learn why this place is held so sacredly amongst Grecians alike. The untold stories of the ancient Delians were preserved here in the bones of their temples and homes. We don't speak the same language, but words are useless to the ancients anyways, for you can only understand their message when you walk where they once did. It was the hottest it had been since we arrived in Greece. We set out to see what we could of the island, but unfortunately, the 3-hour allotted time wasn't enough to see everything. What we got to explore, though, was impactful. Delos has a large natural supply of slate, granite, and gneiss, as seen in the many ruins around the island. These stones were molded to construct their homes and governmental buildings, as well as their temples for reverence of their many gods. Legend has it that the sun god Apollo and his sister Artemis were born on Delos, contributing to the sacredness that Delos holds. The sad truth around the island is that predating Christ, it was conquered many times over. Unfortunately, when islands as small as Delos gain religious or sacred status, tyrants with bigger armies catch wind and can force them to submit under their rule, which happened many times, from the Romans to the Macedonians to the Athenians and the Mycenaeans. All of these civilizations at one point in time successfully took over Delos, meaning that this poor island in its heyday saw more unrest and pillaging than it actually saw peace. Making our way towards the summit of Mount Cynthus, Will and I kept getting caught up in imagining how this place looked and operated in times where its people did experience peace. What were the day-to-day lives like of these ordinary people? One thing we know for certain is that people from everywhere and every era have always been able to figure things out. You can see the many ruins of reservoirs and wells that were built, which means that Delos had plenty of fresh water to quench its people. Like any other civilization, there's evidence around the island of the distinction between the lower, middle, and upper classes. I remember passing a tour guide and hearing them mention that granite and marble were used in more upper-class families and had detailed art carved into them. See those round bits in there? I guess maybe go on the top of these. We will also see floor mosaics as we travel around the island, which were found more in upper-class homes and governmental buildings. From what I've read, a lot of the floor mosaics were created during Greece's Hellenistic period, right before the first time Roman rule came over Delos. They range from being somewhat basic to really artistically tailored, and I'm thankful that their detail and beauty has withstood the amount of abuse that the island and its people took. Our paths cross the remnants of the Temple of Isis, who is recognized as the Egyptian goddess of magic and wisdom. Why there are temples honoring other cultures' gods on the island, I don't know. But I can only assume that this is part and parcel of the magic you feel when you visit Delos. Make your way to the top of the mountain, where it is said that the sun god Apollo was born, and I think you'll feel that the hike was well worth the views. Heading back down the mountain, we came across the temple of Hercules, or as the Greeks would say, Heracles. We were constantly questioning just how in the world did these people get these boulders stacked like so?
I guess I'm not an engineer, but I mean...
And an even better question is, how is it still standing today?
That's unbelievable.
Continuing down, we were stoked to find this huge fig tree, and it was full of them. The climate here is so arid, however, and we found that the figs were a direct reflection of the land. We wondered how old this tree could be, another one of our many ponderings while visiting Delos.
I thought they were going to be good, but they're very dry.
Let me see it. Yeesh.
Maybe we'll find a juicy one. Maybe not. This is loaded though. Look at all of them. Maybe a few months. Oh, I wonder if you eat them green.
Coming around on the House of Dolphins, so named due to the mosaic on the floor containing 2 dolphins in all 4 corners of the artwork. The detail on this mosaic is wild. But this was a private residence, and I surmise that this had to be the home of a pretty wealthy individual or family to have had the money to build a home of this size. To see an ancient foundation be this old and have retained its mass makes me wonder just how big was this house when it was originally built. Moving away from the areas of residence, we made our way towards the theater district.
How big it is. Breaking rules out here.
Excavation of the theater began in 1882, but its construction began around 315 BC, and it took approximately 70 years to be completed. The theater is completely comprised of marble and is predicted to have been able to hold around 6,500 spectators.
To be or not to be? No enemy wronged me, and no friend ever served me, to whom I have not repaid in full. That was Sully.
Will is a big history junkie, and I've heard him say this quote from Sulla of Rome a few times. We didn't actually know this before visiting Delos, but later learned that Sulla visited the island shortly after the attack that was led by Mithridates of Pontus, Sulla's longtime enemy. If there's anything I've learned from visiting Delos, it's that the citizens that desire peace are always the ones who suffer the wars waged by tyrants. Not only was this island pillaged many times over, but many times over, the locals were exiled, and people that had died and were buried on the island were exhumed to be reburied on the neighboring island of Rhenia, all in the name of keeping Delos sacred. Those decisions were made by dictators, who clearly had trouble grasping the concept of sacredness. The politicians that chose to sack Delos didn't give a damn about its sacredness, or the people that they meant to rule, for they would have been hand in hand in worship with the people of Delos, honoring the land that the people of Delos called home. If you take anything away from the story of Delos, remember its people and all that they lost, for many were robbed of their home if they survived.
to the spoon?
Check it out.
How you feel?
Like a baby.
You feel better now? It was quite